Everyone. All right, welcome to today's TOC meeting. Looks like we have a few topics on the agenda. Our usual topic about driving forward the working group charters and then supporting working group operations. We had one that Amelia suggested. I don't know if she's going to show up to discuss this, but she was wondering if about getting some sort of right access to the community repo to start putting working group operating documents there. And then any other business or topics we want to discuss. All right, should we check in on working group charters?
Okay, maybe I start with the app runtime interfaces working group. So I included lots of feedback, especially from Greg, who helped a lot in finding initial approvers on the different areas in this group. I would say that the at least important projects are meanwhile covered. There are some approvers missing for build packs other than Java build pack, and Stratos is still missing. Everything else has at least a few approvers. I mean, the list may change over time, but it's good to go. I also removed all the open questions, and in the comment I wrote the answers that we discussed the last time. So from my point of view, we could give it a vote or open it for comments for one more week and then get it merged as well.
Cool, that is great.
Makes me a little nervous to have no approvers for most of the build packs. And we could use this week to try to find them. I bet Ryan Moran would tag a few people. Have you asked him yet, Stefan? If he knows anybody who's working on, because he's working on Pacato build packs and there's so much overlap where the same people are working on.
I can ask there, no problem. We have two names, but this is Java build pack and there are none for the others.
Right. I think it was relatively easy to find approvers for. Eric, why was I doing this? I was looking through the list of build pack approvers. Anyway, I was looking through the Pacato publishes the names, right, for each of the types of build packs. And there's going to be a high overlap with the people who do the Node.js Pacato build pack and the Node.js Cloud Foundry TOC build pack. It's going to be the same people probably, if we're lucky. I think I wouldn't want to put forward the thing really until we have most, if not all, the build packs covered, because they are really actively being used. About Stratos, does anybody know, is Stratos keeping up with Cloud Foundry, or is it a little bit old at this point? Like, is it going to add HTTP2 support to, like, as the CF API changes? Is Stratos keeping up or not?
Let me check on it, but my impression was that it hasn't been. I just looked at the main repo and it's now been just 6 months since it had any commits at all.
Right, so Stefan, you're not probably going to be able to find somebody. You can look around, but I don't think we should gate on Stratos if there's no active development, if it's not keeping up with CF.
Didn't Chris already announce that we are going to archive it if nobody shows up on mailing list?
Well, that was actually
correctly?
That was kubectf and Quarks.
Yeah.
Oh, that was just kubecf and Quarks.
Yeah.
Okay.
My question would now be how to go on. I mean, there's option one. We simply remove it from this proposal for now, and then go the ethic way, basically, unless somebody shows up, or we just write here a comment that waiting for approvers or whatever. I mean, these are the two options. Maybe we go.
I would opt for going for a similar way than kubecf and Quarks. If there's nobody showing up, then we shouldn't feel blocked by this, right?
Yeah,
Establishing
would be my proposal as well, actually.
Then there is no community UI. That's all that means, right? If nobody wants to pick it up as part of the community, then there's none.
Yeah, I think we can just print it out for now. We can have that independent cycle of asking whether anyone wants to pick it up. And if nobody does in a reasonable period of time, then we can archive it.
I do agree though with respect to build packs. So I think like actually Ryan and the other colleagues from Paketo actually always insisted like in reality it's going to be the same people. Like we should nail them on that and say, yeah, now make them show up.
Yeah, that's now the downside of the split working group proposal, but you have to go one way. I will ask Ryan, and then we go on. Okay, then we leave it on draft for, let's say, 1 more week. And hopefully next week we have also then the build packs list filled, and Stratus, I will take it out for now and just comment that it's probably going the way to the attic slowly.
Yep. Feel free to submit it midweek. If you find the build pack people, you can just tell us, and we'll start the approval process.
By the way, how do I get rid of this draft label? That's something I didn't find.
Oh, there's some UI element to convert it to a real PR.
It's like down where the checks are, where the merge button is, on the upper right of that box is ready for review. That is taking off the draft. So at the very bottom, right above writing comments on the PR.
There's merge PR, and if I know, sure. Ready for, I found it. Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's too long. Meanwhile, the discussion. Good. Then as soon as something, if I have everything, I will do that and then announce it on the TOC Slack channel, just that everybody is aware. Cool.
Great. My update can be brief. I have not moved the community engagement one forward at all over the past week.
On the services side, Marcel and I have made progress. I think we're ready. We're just tracking down. It was really fun to try to pick the line between concrete volume service implementation and volume service Diego plumbing. We had to like cut a line through the middle of volume services. And I think we found one that everybody's happy with. I think Amelia signed off on that, but I'm not 100% sure. So expect me to submit the services working group later today and start tagging you all for approval. Anybody else have one?
Oh, I think Lee had been working on the vulnerability management one, but he's not here to report on that. All right. Were there any others that we had on the agenda? I think maybe that's it for the current set that we've been working on. In that case, why don't we move on to discussing support for working group operations? We had a few open discussion topics there. Let me also try pinging Amelia to see if she is going to show up to discuss this or her other agenda item.
Also, I've added writers to the community repo. I think the community repo is branch protected. So you can't edit, unless you're an admin, you can't edit the main branch. So I don't see a lot of danger of adding people who are known to the community and want to make community like PR related improvements as writers. So they don't have to do what Eric did and make personal forks and then try to collaborate on them. So I added like Ruben. Ruben's a writer on there because he and I worked on one of the PRs. I'm sure Marcel is a writer.
What I would probably do is like in concrete for the ask for getting write access to the community repo as a lead, I would probably start introducing teams for the working groups, right? For leads, for approvers, members. I'm not sure if there's anything special, but maybe also members. That's maybe easier to manage, right? Then you just have a bunch of teams in the community repo. But like you're right, if it's about being able to create branches in there, maybe we actually want a broader access to that even. But independent of that, I would start introducing these kind of teams, and would actually recommend to working groups that they use teams and not individual contributors on the different repos for managing access and rights, because it's going to be a mess otherwise in a couple of years with individuals edit. Who would do that?
Chris,
Is that would Chris set these up, or
I can
would that
certainly
be-
set those teams up as soon as someone gives me the the list of GitHub handles. Yeah, I can set that up.
I think they're all in the definitions of the working groups.
Oh, right.
So Chris, I think the
I
concrete
can do
ask
that
for
now,
you would be,
then, yeah.
yeah, now that all the approved working groups,
Right.
create a set
Yep.
of relevant teams, which is like, there's probably a team which is all the working group leads.
Yeah.
For example, people who should definitely have right access to the community repo. And then there's another team, which is like, I don't know, runtime contributors, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so we are going to need to think about the structure that actually makes sense. You can nest, can you nest
It's-
teams?
I think you can nest teams, and
Yeah.
I think teams can be members of teams, and I would probably go for role-based per working group, and then maybe there are some of these aggregate things. And maybe we can also work with delegates here, right? Maybe it's enough if Chris actually creates the lead teams and
Mhm.
makes the leads admins of these. Well, maybe you need to actually create the teams, but you don't have to fill them with names. And then just make the leads admins of the working group teams, and then they can, like, working groups can self-manage there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll create a working groups leads team that has right access to the community repo. And then I'll create the other, all the already approved, finalized working groups. I'll create teams for them, and I'll just add the lead as an admin.
I just guess you need at least 2 teams per working group, one for the leads and one for the approvers, because they might have different access permissions. Like, probably the leads will get admin permissions on the repos. I don't know. Like, it's up to the working groups. Like I personally, for my teams here, whatever rights in GitHub I give to my team, right? That doesn't make sense to play hide and seek there. But this is kind of up to the working groups, and we should at least provide the structure to have an approach there.
Well, I can reach out to the leads perhaps, and I mean, and just ask them how they want to structure. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. I'll get the the working group leads, that one team set up, right after this call, and then I can ping the leads for each individual working group and see how they want me to set that up.
And Jan's point is, rather than have make a team for runtime leads, even if there's just one person in it, because then like the working group leads team can have members of the various sub teams be
Right.
members of that leads team, and then you can evolve the structure of who the leads are over time more easily, right? It's that
Right.
indirection layer where we can add and remove leads without changing anything else. The harder part, where I think that this model works just fine, I'd say where this is going to fall down is changing repository permissions, because it's going to be too much work, right? To go through each of the repos covered in each of those and manually remove people and add back the right people and so on. I know, Ruben, you were looking at automation on this front.
Yeah.
What do you think we should do here?
Well, we can use Terraform for that. So if we have the teams, we can just create a simple config file. It would be nice to have some form of machine parsable definition of the working groups, where we have the list of repositories and the permission, or the different roles and their names, GitHub handles, like some YAML format or something. I don't know. Would be nice to have that in the community repo for the approved ones. Maybe it's a global file, I don't know, but yeah, that would be useful to have. And with regards to that, I think there's also Amelia has been doing some work on some policies for the working group. They I think they are scoped to the application runtime group, right? But they seem really global. I mean, they could apply to all working groups. I would actually like that maybe if we can agree on like those types of standard practices across the whole foundation. Because if we do, right, then it's easier to automate, right? There's things like branch protection rules in there or ideas about those, and maybe like approvers, how we want to deal with that, like have a minimum of 2 GitHub approvals per PR. I mean, those are rules that we can actually codify and roll out across all the repos. It's like codifying the things that we discuss here.
It's still going to be a conflict with, or in conflict with, potentially local decisions in a working group, right? But yeah, I agree that these probably make sense. I would actually like to see multiple working groups picking these up, but it's harder to orchestrate if we now say we want this as a global thing. By the way, in terms of permissions, I think we are only halfway there with creating the teams. Like Amelia was actually asking for permissions to merge PRs. And I guess that's the code owners features of GitHub that we would have to be looking into. I think there's a way to configure GitHub to have AutoMerge on, only depending on you have the right rev views, and you can make that make a part of that you need code owners files and like be a code owner. And then if we structure the community repo that working group leads can be code owners of a folder for their working group, then they can just really work in there automatically. But that would be something to look into. I've never really used code owners files. The only time I've seen them that was in Istio times, and they were using Google Prow to actually enforce merge stuff. So they weren't using GitHub native things because they were not in place, I think.
Yeah, I think having a subdirectory for each working group where they could have that local autonomy to make those decisions sounds right to me. If it would be possible to automate with some of the code owner stuff, then that definitely sounds appealing.
Okay, well, this is very interesting. I feel like we have to beta test this. There's like no version of this that works that we roll out simultaneously to all the working groups and all the repos, right? We like actually have to try a small version of it, right? Including code owners. Like, this is a really cool idea. We should see if we can make this work for like 2 repos. And if Amelia is willing to spend some time beta testing it or like designing this initial thing, that would be fantastic. We can't sign her up for that. She's not here. But that is probably the right strategy. Or Ruben, both of you have been pretty involved in trying to figure out strategies here. I don't really care, but somebody needs to try one of these strategies. And like, code owner sounds fantastic because you get to codify in the repo who actually is able to make the changes. You could maybe even have the code owners be a submodule so that like the team, the working group definition can live outside the repo, but also still be codified. Now I'm just making stuff up. But something like that could be really interesting. Otherwise, we're going to have to sync code owners. We have another problem then, right? Which is like, there's like 100 repos in runtime, and like the code owners file needs to be synced across them, which is doable.
GitHub actions for that.
Yeah, something like that. I think regardless, we need, well, this is interesting. So there's 2 possible proposals for how to enforce access to working groups. Like, one of them is they're encoded in the repositories, right, through code owners, and another is they're encoded in the definition of the working group in some sort of machine readable format such that it can be passed through Terraform to apply right? We have all the information in these docs. They're just not codified in a way that they could be machine read.
But I think the proposal from Jan was about the community repo, right? So we would need code owners in the community repo to protect subdirectories in there. The other thing was about like setting up permissions on all the assets that are within a working group, like all the repos. And for those, we just need branch protection rules and just some teams assigned to them to as approvers or something. I don't know.
But you could take code owners and apply that there as well, right? You could say like the definition of who is allowed to do approval on a repo actually should live in the repo rather than in some external thing. Then you don't have to apply it through some alternate mechanism like reconfiguring teams periodically. But you do have to make it correct within the repo. And if it's like there's a million copies of essentially the same set of people, that becomes a huge problem. So maybe you're better off. I don't know. They're both going to be some work to set up whatever strategy we go with. And I'm fine doing code owners on like the community repo and not the other ones or whatever, right? That makes sense to me.
I think it depends on what we actually want to achieve. If multiple people should get write access to make it easy to branch in the community repo, then we should probably have something like code owners. If it's okay to just allow that to the tech leads, then we can maybe just live with they won't merge anything that we haven't agreed upon, right? If we have a limited set of people with write permissions, we maybe don't need code ownerships directly there, if that complicates things, right? We can also work trust-based. I mean, it's in the end, it's there, right? I mean, you can even read who did the thing wrongly and figure out if it was a mistake or actually crafted in. So, but that really depends. If we want to be really open and say, yeah, everyone should be able to work in the community repo creating branches, then I think they immediately have approval rights there, right? That's the right access level, I think.
Yeah, so I wouldn't go with auto merging in like the repos within the working groups. I mean, we've been experimenting with that project a bit, and then like can happen that things are approved but are actually still blocked on some other PR, right? And there's no like way to show that in GitHub. To make it like officially blocked. So in the UI it says approved, but you still know that it's blocked. Also, for at least in the Bosch related things, we have this thing where you do some reviews and then you are 80% certain that it won't break anything, or maybe 90%. And then it still has to go through CI because we don't have like CI on all the branches. So we do want to limit the stuff that we merge at the same time, because there's like some aftermath of like it has been merged and now it has to be shepherded through CI, and we don't want too many things to be in flight at the same time. So there's still some manual coordination happening there. It's not a perfect world, unfortunately.
I wonder,
Well,
I mean,
interesting.
yeah, I wonder if this is kind of getting complicated and wide-ranging enough that we might want to try to write down some sort of proposal to address like what we really want the access and automation to be across these different sets of assets, and then like how we might actually achieve that. Because I'm certainly having a hard time keeping track of everything as we think about different aspects of this.
Agreed.
Yeah,
There's a
I
lot of
agree.
options, right?
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I mean, like I've been doing some experimentation, but it feels like, yeah, some things we would need to have some agreement or alignment, right? So it's like, I cannot roll this out. So it's more of an experiment. So I gather some information. So yeah, it would be nice to go through like some process where we agree that this is how we're gonna do it, right? And then we can actually make it so.
Ruben, have you been keeping notes in like a Google Doc or GitHub repo or anything about any of the experiments? I'm just wondering if there's like a natural starting point for
There's
that.
stuff. So I'm just, yeah, I have that Terraform automation just to do the project part. I haven't looked into the, I mean, similar things can be applied to the branch protection rules, but I haven't spiked that out yet. I just saw that it there's support for that in the Terraform automation. But yeah, would that be like would that be a similar proposal as like what Amelia is doing for the collaboration, like, or do you want a Google Doc for this? Because all the other approval or proposals go through a PR, right? Would this also be something to?
Well, I think maybe if we get to the point of knowing what we want to codify in like the community repo or something about this automation or the rules we want to set up, but it might be easier to get started first in a Google Doc. Like that might be a little more fluid as we kind of rough out the ideas around this. So I don't know. I didn't have a strong opinion. My impression has been that like the PRs that Amelia created over the past week have seemed a little maybe smaller in scope in terms of behavior, and this seemed a little more complicated. So I thought just having some sort of collaborative space that isn't just us talking on this call might be helpful for us to try to hammer out some of the details.
So the
Right.
problem is that we don't have anybody signing up to own that. Like, it's going to be some work to build that proposal. I think like Ruben or Amelia would be best positioned to do it from some experience. So maybe we can asynchronously see if one of you two or both of you together can try to build the stub of a proposal, and then we can all weigh in on what the pros and cons of different options are, and then we'll try to get to a decision in the next week or two.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yesterday I already had a bit of a conversation with at least someone on her team, Jeff. So I think we're going to set up a call shortly to discuss these things further. So it makes sense to maybe capture those things in a document proposal.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Ruben. That would be great even to get that started if you're already having those discussions. I think related, I had started a PR to, it's still in draft form, but just to provide a directory of regular forums and other assets for the working groups as they're getting started. I forget if foundational infrastructure had decided anything about like a regular open forum for the working group or different forums for different areas. Had you all decided on anything about that yet, Ruben?
Sorry, I was typing. Well, what was the question about?
Oh, just wondering if foundational infrastructure had decided anything about like a schedule for regular open forums and any associated assets like meeting notes journals.
Yeah, we did. As in just before this call. So I reached out to Chris to set up a Zoom call. So we're planning on doing like once a week, Thursdays, same time as the TOC call. But then, yeah. And we're still wondering if we need multiple calls because of the subgroups. But we're gonna try first with just one call, and you should use it more for like if there's pull requests that need more discussion or blocked for a long time, and we will try to first do like assign reviewers and stuff like more asynchronously. So don't use the Zoom call to assign things. We will assign things once they come in, and then just work that way.
Okay, great, awesome. That sounds like a good thing to try out.
Just to briefly touch on the Zoom calls, both Amelia and Ruben have asked me to set those up, which I can certainly do. There is one limitation with Zoom in that I can't designate people outside of my organization, which is a Linux Foundation, to be an alternative host. So basically, I mean, and Ram and I one of us may be joining these working groups meetings, but I don't think we can necessarily say that one of us will be at every working group meeting once we get all of these working groups up and running. So I can like set it up the way that I did like the CAPI office hours, where basically it starts at that time and it records, and there it is, regardless of whether or not I join or Ram joins. So I mean, that's the best way I can set that up right now. I just want to like chat about that because it isn't really ideal. It would be much better if I could set Ruben as an alternative host, right? Or Amelia as an alternative host, but I can't do that without, I mean, if that's important, we could talk about, getting them a Zoom account through us. It would be like $12 a month or something like that. So, but just wanted to touch base on that. Does that sound acceptable, just to have an automatic like meeting room that opens at this time and starts recording? Okay, well, I'll set it up that way, and then I'll get invites set out. So I'll talk to you about that, Ruben. Also, I did just want to, while we were talking about setting up teams and whatnot, so obviously GitHub does not allow cross-org teams. So when we're setting up these teams, is this a good time? I know we've chatted about this a little bit, to kind of deprecate the incubator. Should we move all of the all of the repos that are in the incubator over to Cloud Foundry when we create these teams? And then when we're done, presumably everything left in the incubator can be archived.
Yeah, I mean, if we have repos that, we've now identified as assets that working groups are going to be responsible for, like probably in conjunction with the working groups to make sure it doesn't break automation, but moving those over to the main CF org makes sense to me.
Right.
Yeah, and Stefan, I don't know what you think about that.
Are all these repos? I mean, go on, Stefan.
I recently requested a few additional repos in Cloud Foundry Incubator because I don't know a better home for now. These are for performance testing, etc. They are part of the working group, so that's fine if they move over. There might be in the near future a few more repositories that I would like to request. These are more for POCs, and this is something, or spikes. The question is, that's not necessarily directly part of a working group yet, or the idea is to start a discussion whether it becomes part of a working group. And then the question is, what would be a good home for this? Don't know. I mean,
right. I mean, if there's still a need for a second org as an incubator, we could certainly keep that going. I just, if as far as as far as permissions goes, it's a lot easier to have everything under one org. And I know with foundational infrastructure, there's a couple of other orgs, Bosch IO and Bosch packages, and I'll let Ruben figure out how to sort that out. But at least as far as the two owned by Cloud Foundry, it would make sense, I think, to have all of those under one org, since we no longer have that, the old, incubating projects and live projects. So if there's a reason to keep the incubator around, that's fine. I just would think that we could just, you could have an incubating, a test repository or whatever in the Cloud Foundry org.
If that's possible, then
Yeah.
no problem. I mean, I don't care really whether it's in Cloud Foundry or Cloud Foundry Incubator. I just would like to have it somewhere close to Cloud Foundry so that it can be discovered by people, and that we
we can add repos to Cloud Foundry anytime you'd like. I mean, and they can be officially part of a working group or not. I would
think at some point we also discussed using some sort of labels or something to mark.
all fine. Makes sense.
This sounds good. The only thing I would bring up is if there's any Go code left in Cloud Foundry Incubator that doesn't use the redirect feature for dependency management, this could be a problem. So that's at least one of the things. Yeah.
Right. Well,
Code doesn't like moving code over.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll work with the working group leads to, when we set that up, like, I'll just ask them for these specific repositories in the incubator, can we move these over? That way your working group doesn't have to have any permissions for any of this stuff.
I would try to get that handoff kind of from the working group leads to say, yeah, that's fine to move it and then move it. I think everything besides Go is fine because GitHub does redirects, right? Any link that you have somewhere will, even if you move that across orgs, will be redirected. So there shouldn't be a problem. Like besides the one in Go. I don't think that any other of these systems has a problem either. So I guess it's only that one. And I fully agree for incubating in the Cloud Foundry org. That there shouldn't be a problem, right? There's no limit on repositories or something in the.
I don't believe so.
In the plan that we have, right? Then.
Yeah.
We can test drive that with, I think, the 2 new repos that they should be. They should come in the next 2 to 4 weeks. Let's say it like this. Won't promise. Deadlines are difficult, but.
And I do wonder if we could use the existing Cloud Foundry community org for things that are not yet officially owned by a working group also. I mean, if that's also a kind of a natural experimentation space. And then, we don't have any confusion around like, what does incubating status mean for this old GitHub org that kind of was a consequence of the previous governance and operational model. But I mean, if we're also pretty confident that we're like, if something works out, then a working group is going to end up adopting that code base, then we could just start out in the CF org potentially. I don't know, just thinking about like, if we want to end up with a kind of an invariant across the CF GitHub org that, unless there's maybe a specific administrative repo, like even the community repo, maybe there's a small designated set that's not owned by a working group, but everything else is, if it's in that org, there's a working group that owns it and is managing it, just so that we don't end up with these pockets of unadministered repos within the organization. Or I guess that it's archived. That's the the kind of terminal state for any of those repos.
I agree that we should strive for everything being owned by a working group, and that means if you want an incubating repo, you at least need some support from the working group to start that effort.
Yeah. Okay, well, that sounds like maybe a principle to converge on in terms of just the repo ownership within the Cloud Foundry org. Like, we'd want to get to a state where, apart from the community repo and some other administrative things, everything else is actually owned by a working group. So if it's there, a working group could sponsor an experiment within the org.
Once we have all these working groups set up, then I think it'll be quite satisfying to go through the rest of the Cloud Foundry org and just start archiving like mad. A lot of the credits there that you know, sort of left because it's easier to leave, but it'll be nice to do some cleanup after that.
It's like everything will have an owner, right? The community repo is owned by the TOC. It's not a working group, but
yeah, there's an official body that governs it.
Yep.
All right. Well, any other working group support issues we need to talk about while we've got people here?
Eric, you had mentioned creating shared Google Drive folders. So I have enabled shared drives on the CFF G Suite account. So hopefully it's not as complicated as GitHub repos, but depending on what the hierarchy is that you want, whether it's like one top level directory and then like one for each working group or something like that, just but when folks know, just let me know and I'm happy to create them and assign the right kind of permissions, I guess.
Great, thanks, Ron. That sounds like something that Ruben, if you're going to talk to Amelia about more working group details, if you get a chance to discuss that and come to any conclusions about what kind of document structure you think might be useful, that'd be great.
I mean, I don't see any reason why not to just have like one directory per working group, right? This doesn't sound that complicated. I mean, couldn't we just start with that?
Yep. One reason I could imagine is that some proposals are overarching across several working groups. Let's take this JJ discussion. That's stem cell plus CF Linux FS2 plus build packs are already touched. Where would you put it? Of course, you can put it somewhere and then everybody can read it. But you know, so if my typical way out here in such discussions is usually if I have no need yet to add structure, start with one. And when we see it doesn't scale out and we need more structure, then add it when we have more clarity about it. Don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about proposals that could have substantial impact to multiple working groups. I mean, I feel like in this case, for the JJ stem cell proposal, I think you could either see it as, I think kind of Stevenson is taking this on behalf of the whole TOC as a very cross-cutting concern. Or you could kind of view it as being led by the foundational infrastructure working group, but then it has propagation effects to the other ones. So maybe it might make sense to just have kind of a designated sponsoring body for one of the proposal, for each proposal, and then we could also probably help to have a TOC folder in that Google Drive structure as well. So I could see it landing in those, but maybe referring to other working groups that it's expected to have impact on. I mean, just having some subdirectories within a Google Drive for the working groups and for the TOC doesn't sound like a too complicated level of hierarchy, but it should still let us stay out of each other's way. One of the nice things about Google Drive is that you can also reorganize those files at any point without breaking the URLs, if you're the least bit careful about it. So we could start with one structure and then reorganize after a while if that's not working. I guess there's the separate issue of access permissions to that drive, because we might be concerned about internet vandalism, or if we allow completely anonymous access to add things to it. I don't know if that would mean like whoever is a TOC member or member in, actually, I think we might want to check and see what other communities like Knative have done around their drive permissions. Because I think they at least have a bit of a cursory check to make sure that totally random people from the internet aren't going to come through and delete everything or leave nasty comments on things.
I think it's by joining a Google Groups per working group that you get access to these folders, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't know it all for Knative, but if they do it similarly to Istio, then it's going to be that way.
I think for Knative, it might have even just been there's a Google group for the whole organization. Once you join that, you have at least some level of access to the shared drive. But I don't remember if there are tiers within that hierarchy. Well, it seems like something we could look into over the next week or so as we try to get this set up. Okay, are there any other topics we want to discuss before we close out today? All right, well, if not, I think we can adjourn for the day. And thanks everyone for attending. See you next week, if not before. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
you. Bye-bye.
bye.